When you're dragging ass out of bed and the hair's mussed up on your head, you picture the 20th Maine and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with little ground top, bro.
When you're dragging ass out of bed, the hair's mussed up on your head. You picture the 20th Maine, and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Ground Top Bro.
Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top by Bantam Roasters is available at 82 Steinware Avenue in Gettysburg or at addressinggettysburg.com/cafe.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios,
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. And today we are talking with our friend Charlie Fennell about Culp's Hill on July 3rd, 1863. And specifically the Union offensive, right, is what we're doing. I mean, that's really kind of what starts the fighting there, obviously. Yeah. So we'll talk about that. Welcome back, Charlie.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to say I love the bright colors of your shirt.
Yes.
It sets you off. It sets you apart from the background, which I like because everybody wears too many muted colors when they come in here.
It represents my checkered past.
I'm sure it does. In the back, controlling the cameras is Mike Boriski of Civil War Tees. Hello, Mikey.
Hello, Matthew.
Thank you for loaning us your time and talents in the back.
You are welcome.
Okay, so the first thing I want to do here, now, Culp's Hill, 2 days of fighting over that hill, right? The longest number of hours, or the most number of hours spent fighting over one piece of ground in the Battle of Gettysburg, correct?
Yes.
And the bulk of that fighting is actually on July 3rd.
Correct.
Okay. So one thing I did during the anniversaries, and I should have asked you, like I said before, I should have asked you to listen to it before I put it out, but I was in a hurry. So I didn't have the time. I did a little kind of like a narration of each day of the battle with sound effects and all that stuff. And I want to know that I got the information correct because this was kind of collaborative between me and Six Questions Lens.
Okay.
And then because it was done hastily, I took what we had written and I put it into Chat GPT to spruce it up a bit, and kind of make it make more sense. And then I realized that took me twice as long because I go, oh, wait, that doesn't know what it's talking about. And so I had to correct most of ChatGPT anyway, so it was moot. But anyway, there were a couple of things that I've noticed on the other days that I was like, oh, that's not right. I got that wrong, or the timeline's a little off and stuff. Yeah. So I thought for your sake, or not for your sake, but for the audience's sake that might have listened to it, let's listen to a little bit of it. Okay. And then when I get something wrong, just raise your hand and I'll stop it. Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. Here we go. Here we go. Let's try it now.
Okay.
Charlie.
The Union forces would initiate an attack for the first time since the battle began. Union 12th Corps soldiers returning from being sent to reinforce the southern end of the battlefield would find in the darkness of the morning that the fortifications they had built were now occupied by some squatters with unfriendly dispositions. When informed of this, Union 12th Corps Commander Henry Slocum declared that the men of the 12th Corps would drive them out in the morning. At 4 in the morning, the Union artillery opened fire. A Union artillerist would later write, "We poured shot and shell into them." These missiles of death and destruction would splinter trees and send branches careening to the earth and on top of rebel soldiers. This morning, The fighting on Culp's Hill foreshadowed what the war would become. It was not the pageantry of bayonets gleaming in the sunlight, banners fluttering in the air, or officers leading their men with their hats on the tips of their swords across open fields. Instead, wave upon wave of rebel soldiers, including the vaunted Stonewall Brigade, would throw themselves into the hellfire sent their way by the enemy in relative safety behind breastworks or in trenches. Licensed Battlefield Guide, Charlie Fennell.
Okay, July 3rd, Culp's Hill.
That's you. All right. Did I get it right?
Yeah, pretty close.
Pretty
Absolutely,
close.
Yeah.
Pretty close. What was not exactly there?
It's probably about 4:30 artillery, but who's going to argue about half an hour?
Okay.
So that was good.
So that's it?
You could make a case that perhaps the Union intended to preserve a defensive line, so it's not technically an offensive action.
Like defensive in strategy, offensive in tactics?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Culp's Hill was where they were planning to launch a major offensive for the first time in the battle. Yeah.
And I think I used the incorrect grammar. I said returning from being sent to or something like that, and that was very awkward. I did not like that.
But Meade was planning on conducting an offensive there on the morning of the 2nd.
Okay.
On Culp's Hill. So he was very much aware of the sensitivity of that to his position at Gettysburg.
Okay.
Okay. So, that was in his mind. And now the Confederate or the Union were almost forced into offensive action to restore the line that they had lost on the evening of the 2nd.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So, so they begin this artillery. Now, first of all, where are the Confederates? So the Union troops on the 2nd, as you told us, and the last time we talked about this for July 2nd, the Union troops, for the most part, are gone from Culp's Hill. There's Greene's brigade that's left, but there's basically a corps worth of breastworks unoccupied, except for what Greene covers. Right. So the
at least a division.
At least, at least a division.
Yeah.
So the Confederates then move into a lot of that space. And when the Union troops return, what's that story? There's a story about they see somebody in the breastworks, they're not sure if it's friend or foe, and somebody yells out about 3 cheers for Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, well, that's when I guess let me think. B. Kane coming back, and they sent out to see who was in the breastworks because they were fired on. Incidentally, they thought it was Greene. Men who were a little concerned that there was activity in their rear, without knowing who they were. They shoot first, ask questions later. So they sent out a guy. In the story that I read once was where they sent out a lieutenant and he yelled 3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln and barely got away with his life. The woods erupted in flame and smoke, and he came back and reported not a good Union man amongst them, all secessionist Democrats that were up in there, or something to that effect.
Right.
But that's how they found out.
Okay.
It's called reconnaissance by contact.
Okay. Yeah, right.
My mother used to park that way. When she hit it, she knew she was close
Parallel
enough.
parking by contact.
But anyway, that's essentially what happens because they're coming back trying to get into their trench line that they had established that morning of the 2nd, not knowing that trench line had been taken by the Confederates.
So now they know.
Yes.
And now they're going to try to dislodge them in the morning. Is it planned to do it in the morning or at twilight?
They had the Corps Commanders Conference that evening, as you know.
Sure.
Over at the Lydia Leicester house. Mm-hmm. And me just wanted to kind of get a consensus of opinion. And basically the opinion was to stay where they were and fight it out. And so as they were leaving the conference, of course, Alpheus Williams, you have Jesse Williams, he's on the other side, so we won't talk about him. Mm-hmm. But Alpheus Williams, the acting Corps commander, okay, and he was very upset, and in his absence, Geary's division had been ordered off the hill. He had expected Geary's 3 brigades to occupy the entire trench line.
Okay.
But in his absence, they were ordered off, and of course, the one that didn't get to go was Greene, because by the time he's ready to leave, the Confederates are attacking. So he got permission to stay, but so he was lamenting this fact, and And Slocum at that point said what you said in that little preview we had, that we'll drive them out at dawn. So in other words, there is a planned offensive.
Okay.
Okay, and basically, if you break it down, the idea was artillery preparation, which begins around 4:30 in the morning. Daybreak is 4:35. So roughly in that time frame, you have, let's see, probably 20 guns that open fire into the Confederates who are in behind the Union trenches on the lesser slope of Culp's Hill, the little hill.
So lower Culp's Hill.
The lower Culp's Hill, if you want. Don't tell
Or,
Tim Smith.
I was going to say, or Spangler's Hill.
No one knows what that is. So we'll just call it the lesser hill, and leave it at that. But anyway, so they were back in there when the artillery opened fire. Then Geary's division was supposed to attack the Confederates and drive them out. In the meantime, Williams' division was to make demonstrations, to probe the Confederate line to see if there's any weaknesses, to see exactly where it was, that sort of thing. And this was the plan.
Okay.
Okay. And we also know that the first casualty of any battle is the plan. Okay.
Yeah.
And basically, as we know, if we flip it to the other side, we go to the Confederate side. Lee wants to attack at dawn. Okay. He wants to continue the attacks that kind of went astray on the second day. He wants Ewell to once again assail Culp's Hill, and he wants Longstreet to attack essentially what he believed would be the key to the left flank of the Union line, which is what we call Cemetery Ridge. Okay, there's no plan to advance on Little Round Top, and certainly by July 3rd, you probably don't want to try and take that hill anyway.
Right.
So that was the plan, but as we know, Longstreet was not ready to act for whatever reason. Maybe he just didn't feel like it was an important thing, or he was stubborn. I know that some would say he did it on purpose.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go there. I don't know Longstreet personally, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He just wasn't ready.
What is that? What you think? It just wasn't ready.
He just wasn't ready. I think maybe he was trying to do what Hood had suggested the day before: is go around to the right, and he could see Little Round Top, and you go around to the right. But once again, we talked when we talked about Little Round Top in a prior podcast. It's going to take a long time to get around there.
Right.
It's not like you have major roads. So anyway,
but what gives you that hunch that might have been what he was thinking to go around the right?
Just because he wasn't ready to put his men in exactly where they were in the morning, and Pickett's men were there and ready to go, but they hadn't been deployed.
Right. Okay.
So this was something, but Ewell follows the initiative or the orders, and he attacks at dawn. So I always told people, if you look at the Confederate High Command, the only one that's doing what Lee wants them to is Ewell, and he gets no credit for it at all.
Right.
But anyway, so the attack at dawn was the plan, and of course, you have this current stream of interpretation in that the Union preempted that with their attack. And what we'll say is, Geary alleges that his men attacked at dawn. I mean, that's in his report.
Right. Okay,
but if you look at the casualty rate, that doesn't hold up. And if you look at other reports from the Confederate side and also regimental reports from the Union side, if it was an attack, it was very half-hearted because they knew the Confederates were right out there. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you stick your head up, you're going to get shot. So they kind of hunkered down. The attack at dawn for the Union on Culp's Hill is the artillery barrage. And the Confederates, as we know, do not have adequate positions to place their artillery. And so they had no artillery answer to the Union guns on Powers Hill, along the Baltimore Pike, and on McAllister's Mill Hill is where they were deployed.
Okay, and you said there's about 20 guns or so?
I'd say 20, yeah. There's, let me think. That'd be 26 counting Rigby.
Okay.
Because Rigby was added.
Eleanor.
Yeah.
No. Not an Eleanor?
No.
Okay.
I don't think he's from Maryland. He's not from England.
Okay.
But anyway, he was added there on the 2nd to fire on Benner's Hill. And when the 12th Corps artillery moved off to support, Williams and his effort to bail Sickles out there late in the day, the daylight hours, let's say 6:30, 7 o'clock on July the 2nd, Rigby pretty much remained on Powers Hill. He's got 6 guns. So there's 20 guns in the 12th Corps, 6 10 Parrots, 10 Napoleons, and then with his 3-inch ordnance rifles, you have 16 rifled pieces, and you have 10 Napoleons that are firing at basically close range.
Yeah.
There, and that's the offensive. The idea was to wait for that, but the Confederates didn't give them a chance because they knew that if they didn't attack, they were in rough shape because they're in low ground and they could hear the Union talking above them. They were that close. They were in rocks and stuff and behind trees and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So they knew that they had to do something quickly, or they were going to be at a very big disadvantage.
So today, if you were to go to this area that you're talking about where the artillery was,
yes,
you're looking at a lot of trees.
Correct. Yes.
In other words, and also houses. There's houses that weren't there at the time.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm thinking when you're coming down Hunt Avenue, what's that battery that's right there at the end of Hunt Avenue?
That's Rigby Rugg and Kinsey, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there, I'm guessing they were probably, were they there or were they across the street or in the road?
They're probably where their guns are.
Okay.
Because that's elevated ground.
But they didn't have a house to shoot through.
No. Well, the one, the
Spangler House?
Spangler House was there. I mean, that was there.
But so were there maybe, obviously, I'm going to guess that the Spangler property was larger at that time.
Sure.
And so maybe would there have been barns or so would they
there
been
would have
shooting?
been a barn, some outbuildings, they have chicken coop, that sort of thing.
But in their way, I mean, they wouldn't be firing through that if they could avoid it, right?
No, well, they'd be shooting over some of that, that elevated ground. Remember, the house sits down.
Yeah.
If you ever seen a Spangler house there on Baltimore Pike, it's lower than the Pike.
Right.
It sits down in, so they can fire. They can see directly into Pardee Field.
That's what I'm getting at. Is their visibility
direct line of sight
was not what it is today.
Not what it is today.
Culp's Hill, though wooded, was not as wooded as it is today.
Right. It's where it is wooded was thinner.
Yeah.
Like my hair's getting, and there were a lot less trees around the area.
Yeah.
Okay. They did clear the face of Powers Hill for the anniversary, the sesquicentennial.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that you can have some semblance of. Before they were just in the woods. It's where the young people used to go in the evenings to study history.
Right. I thought it was chemistry.
It was history. This is a history
or biology.
Now you get to the beaver. Quit it.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's why they did it, and they were going to incorporate it into a walking tour to the Spangler farm from the visitor center, which never happened.
Shocker.
Yeah, I know.
So, okay, so they're firing, and they can, if they can't see specifically, they can see the general vicinity of where the Confederates are. Is what I'm trying to get a point
They're
across there.
Shooting in an area.
Yeah, because if you go there today, trying to listen to what Charlie's talking about here, you're going to look out and go, "What the hell is he talking about? Where are they?" Okay, so
it's
that's
better now than it used to be.
Yeah,
they did clear some trees. I mean, you can see in the Spangler's meadow.
But there's that whole meadow,
winter,
right? Yeah,
in the winter. Now is the time to go.
Yeah, always.
Yes.
Okay, so they fire. How long does that go on for?
Well, it goes on. Well, you have different time frames. It's supposed to be 15 minutes, but I think it went longer.
Okay.
Okay, and then of course there's going to be periodic startup of the fight. So the artillery is pretty much firing off and on for the full 7 hours of the fight there on Culp's Hill. Right, so it's, it's one of those things where if the Union infantry advance, then they quit firing. Obviously,
one would hope.
And this is one of the problems they had, because in the woods, and once the smoke starts to accumulate, it was difficult to discern where the Union line was and where the Confederates were. And so, if you look at the reports, and a few people do, you'll find that most of the reports indicate, and this would be along the lower slope. That they were being hit with their own artillery fire.
Sure.
There's numerous examples of that. I know Wooster, who's commanding the 20th Connecticut, basically told him, if you quit this, I said, I'll turn my regiment around and shoot at you. You're doing more damage than the Confederates. And they made an agreement where he would send runners back to tell him what the range was. In other words, you're too short. That sort of thing. And according to Muhlenberg, Lieutenant Muhlenberg, who is commanding the 12th Corps artillery at this time, He said that greatly increased the accuracy of our fire or the damage that we were doing at that point. Selfridge, who is not necessarily a temperate man in the sense, he went back with sword drawn and pistol cocked and demanded, "Who's in charge?" First, everyone pointed at poor Lieutenant Muhlenberg, that guy over there.
He's pissing everybody off.
So he basically told him, blow a hole through you could stick your fist in if you don't correct the range. And he said, "It will be done. It will be done." Yeah. And so you had, and then you go on down the line. Price, the 45th New York. He was saying the same thing. He actually went to Slocum and said, "My men are in harm's way here." And then, and of course, poor McDougal had to write a report explaining why, he was in harm's way. But so the artillery was firing. I think the idea was the artillery fires and then you demonstrate to see what's going on while Geary attacks. Geary didn't attack. Okay, he just didn't do it. He claimed he did. Maybe some of them made a move to attack, but they didn't go beyond the breastworks.
Now, so Geary is positioned more on the top of the hill, right?
He's on the key ground. Right. If the Confederates are going to win that battle on July 3rd, or even on the 2nd, they got to take the ground where Greene held on the 2nd day, where Greene's monuments are, from the top of the hill to the saddle, which separates the lower hill from the upper hill. Right. Okay.
Are 6th Corps reinforcements there yet?
No, they come in at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
8 o'clock.
So it's just 12th Corps men.
And it's kind of interesting how they get there because, Shaler, they did one of those New York Gettysburg books on Shaler's Brigade. Okay. They did it for Warren, they did it for Barlow, all those people. Right. And it's interesting because they had pictures of where they were. There were like 3 different places on the battlefield. But Geary's men... of course, you talk about being in the proximity there and firing. There's a lot of lead flying. Yeah. And Geary's demanding ammunition. One of Meade's concerns, being a logistician, whatever that is, was that, they had outrun a lot of their ammunition wagons to get to Gettysburg. And here's this guy just blazing away. And of course, Meade is a West Pointer. Geary is not. And he just thought he was wasting ammunition. He said something to Slocum. Slocum said something to Geary. Geary said, "Look, they're right out here. What do you want me to do?" And so at that point, then Meade realizes the situation and orders Shaler's brigade to go over and reinforce the 12th Corps. And that comes in around 8 o'clock in the morning. So you're looking at close to 4 hours of fighting before any reinforcements will arrive to support the 12th Corps. Up to that time, let's say for the first 4 hours of that fight, the Confederates probably had a slight numerical advantage over the Union defenders, but the Union defenders have a tremendous advantage in terrain. Yeah. Much like Little Round Top. Sure. Follow that story.
And if I were Geary, I wouldn't leave. I'd let Williams push them. I'll hold them. You push them.
Yeah, and if you look at Williams, he has those sporadic attempts to probe. The most famous being the 2nd Massachusetts and the 27th Indiana in Spangler's Meadow. The question is, when did that happen? A lot of your modern historians, and I date that from, you can probably go back to Batchelder to get this, and certainly Fawns, Connington, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Batchelder, Coddington, and Fawns would say it happened later in the morning. However, if you read the accounts of the men that made the charge, it's early in the morning. Now, I know that a lot of people have timepieces on them. We call them watches today, but I'm sure they would know if it's early morning or late morning. Right. Okay, if you look at the 27th Indiana's advance marker, it said 4 color bearers killed, 4 color bearers wounded. And I believe the time on it, if I remember correctly, which is asking a lot at my age, is like 6 a.m. if it's not 5:30. So it's early in the morning. In other words, when the artillery lifted their fire, then these guys made a probe. They wanted to see if there were Confederates there or if they could find the flank of the Confederate line on Culp's Hill. And, of course, they go out in the meadow, and as we know the story, they get slaughtered.
So you mentioned lines and flanks and stuff. Yes. And for the people who are listening along that might not be looking at a map.
Right. I'm not either.
Me neither.
I'm confused.
Hopefully they're somewhat familiar with the terrain there. But for the record, can you give us the extent of the two lines, the Union line and Confederate lines? Where do they end? Where do they begin? How do they stretch and all that?
Okay, that's a good point. The Union line is easy to figure out in the sense that it starts at the top of the hill. Since we're looking at that fighting, it starts at the tower at the top.
Okay.
And it goes down the line to the saddle. That's that low ground in between the larger and lesser hill. And then it bends back beyond Pardee Field or along the stone wall Pardee Field. And then it goes across into the rocky area near the meadow, which would be next to Rock Creek. So essentially it goes from Rock Creek on the right all the way up the hill to the top of the hill on the left. Okay. The Confederates are at the base of the upper hill, and they'll extend from the stone wall, which is near the modern Park Road, East Confederate Avenue, and they'll be in the woods through there. They'll be behind the Union breastwork starting at the lesser hill where the 1st Maryland or 2nd Maryland, depending on how you want to say it, monument is, and they follow that line down to the stone wall that connects with Rock Creek. Okay, so they're roughly parallel.
You're talking about that stone wall is the one by the bridge on East.
No, it's the one by Spangler's Meadow.
It goes, gotcha.
It goes down there, and it's part of the stone wall that separates Pardee Field from the wooded area.
Yeah,
and at times the Union were behind the rock wall along Pardee Field, and that's because the Confederates, due to the artillery fire, were back behind the Union trenches.
They were on the opposite slope.
Yes, the opposite slope.
The safe side. Their side of the hill. They were like hiding over there.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the Union had the opportunity
to move up
to that stone wall there at times.
It's hard, even, with, I don't know how many times I've driven or walked or ridden a bike around Culp's Hill.
Yes.
But when you talk about, because the stone wall that we're talking about here is now intersected by a road.
It is. A couple times,
right. So, and it wasn't then.
No.
So
the road paralleled the wall.
Right.
It was a farmer's lane is what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's not hard, but it can present a difficulty once in a while, like picturing it the way you're talking about.
Yes.
Do the monuments generally line up with where the troops were positioned?
They do on the upper hill.
On the upper hill.
Yeah. No. And then if you got to divorce yourself from the monuments that occupy the road on the lower hill. Okay, starting with the 123rd New York.
That's because that's where I'm thinking in that area. Yeah.
And all the way down to Spangler's Meadow. Those were July 2nd positions.
Their original positions.
Yeah, the original. They're not there on the 3rd.
Right.
They're back in the woods on the other side of Pardee Field or down in the that high ground by Rock Creek.
When they reclaim the breastworks,
yes,
and they get back to where they're supposed to be, then do the monuments line up with where they were?
Fairly closely.
So they essentially went back in line where they belonged.
Pretty much.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Charlie, all those...
Oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
That's okay. All those monuments that we're talking about there, like McDougal's Brigade.
McDougal's Brigade, correct.
Was there a lot of
Put the camera on you, Mikey.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
People want to see your beautiful face.
Was there a lot of angst with the soldiers after the war? Because almost every one of those descriptions on those monuments mentioned the fact that they built the breastworks there. They were there July 2nd.
Right.
And then when they came back on the 3rd, the enemy was in those breastworks and they had to suffer losses retaking those. Was that a big point of contention?
I think it was. It certainly was with Williams. If you start at the top and look down, Williams was very upset. He wrote his daughters a letter on July 3rd. That's what he did when he got mad. And of course, he wrote when he wasn't mad either. I mean, but he wrote this letter on July 3rd, and we never found it.
Yeah.
It's never been found. His letters have been published in a book. What's that called? The Cannon's Mouth or Cannon's Roar. That's all the letters of Alpheus Williams, except for the one on July 3rd. And so I was told once that maybe a collector has it. Well, collectors don't collect things except to make money. Mm-hmm. And so if a collector had it, it would be out there now.
Right.
Okay. I think it was so vehement in its language, so violent in its language, so uncharacteristic of their father that they destroyed the letter so that no one else would see it.
Right.
Now, on July 8th, in calmer times, you're back in Maryland now, the Confederate Army's in retreat. He writes another letter. And in the letter on the 8th of July, he references the one on the 3rd.
Okay.
And one of the things he said about Williams, sort of nonchalantly saying, we'll drive him out of dawn, he wrote, drive him out of dawn hell. He says the Confederates haven't got a good thing, will be want to give it up. And then he went on to describe the terrain. He said there's rocks and trees that give ample cover. There's a stone wall, and then there's the breastworks we built that they now control.
Okay.
And so this, to get back to your point, Mike, yes, there's angst about losing those breastworks. After all, they put all that time in building them.
Sure.
And now the Confederates have them.
It can't be fun, right?
Well, it certainly would be upsetting.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of men will die needlessly to correct this mistake. And the mistake was removing the rest of Geary's division when he was gone. And that was done by Meade through Slocum.
Okay,
on the 2nd. So that Williams wasn't there. I mean, he was off with his division. He was off at the head of the corps where it was going to make contact, essentially where he was supposed to be. And that was his division. So if it's going into battle, he's going to be with it. All right. And then Geary was going to occupy the trenches until orders came from Slocum that, we meant the whole corps, not just one division.
Right.
Yeah. And so off he goes.
So I would say, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here. The famous stories are the ones you talk about with the 27th Indiana and 2nd Massachusetts and everything. How about moving up the hill?
Okay.
Is it constant fighting?
Pretty much. Yeah, the roar was continuous.
And when Shaler's brigade comes up, is Shaler the only 6th Corps brigade? Okay.
The only one.
So when he comes up to back them up there, and when you drive up the upper Culp's Hill, the bigger one,
right?
You'll see on your right are 12th Corps monuments, on your left are 6th Corps monuments.
Correct.
And they would play kind of like not really a leapfrog, but they'd swap out, right?
Yeah, they swap out. Now,
Talk about that.
Yeah, a lot of that was done by Candy. When Candy comes back, Kane came back that night of the 2nd and runs into Confederates. And then when Candy finally comes back, he's put in the rear where he was on the 2nd day in reserve. And he's used more or less to plug holes.
Now, when you say in the rear, like just behind the first line, or like
it's behind the 6th Corps monuments.
Okay.
There's a swell.
Yeah. So down in that ravine there.
And there's a very famous sketch. I think it's the 28th Pennsylvania getting ready to go in to relieve the line.
Okay.
And they're all lined up there getting ready to go over the top. You got 7 hours close combat. You're shooting pretty much all the time. You're going to run out of bullets. And so you don't have, you're not going to call for people to bring the bullets up, they're going to get shot. And so what you do is you arrange to have relief. And basically the guys in the trenches would communicate the fact that, might be time to get us out of here. We're a little low on bullets. And then the prospective relieving brigade would be notified of that and essentially would advance up onto the swell, out of the swell onto the higher ground to the left of the Park Road as you're going up the hill where the 6th Corps monuments are, and deliver a volley. Okay. And they fire the volley. They're not going to aim at the Confederates. They're going to hit their own men. So they shoot high. And it hits the trees. If you look at the trees on Culp's Hill, okay, you got to look at it in photographs. Now they're all dead.
Right. It's not the actual trees.
It's not the actual trees.
Right.
If you look at them, they're shot all the way up to the top almost.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why. Okay. And when a whole brigade fires, it makes a lot of noise, even in a noisy environment. And so what are the Confederates going to do when they hear that?
They're going to duck.
They're going to duck. And so they duck, and now you run.
Yeah.
The guys that fired run in, the guys that are ready to maybe leave run out. And I think it was Captain Hayes of the 29th Ohio said that, the first time or two that we did it, it was okay, but then we got tired. And he said he lost more men getting in and out of the trenches than he did once he was in.
Interesting. Okay.
Because once he's in, he's protected.
Okay.
You keep your head down, you're all right. But, it's that movement back and forth that would cause some incidental casualties.
Okay.
Okay, as they're moving back in and out, the Confederates had to bring the ammunition up across Rock Creek, which was a much more difficult operation to achieve because you don't want to get it wet.
Right.
If it gets wet, it doesn't work.
Right, and they've got to cross Rock Creek.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
There's no bridge or ferry.
No.
So they've got to do it by going through. And how deep is Rock Creek at that point?
Well, it depends on where you walk.
Okay.
It's a bunch of rocks with water on it. So there's holes. There's shallow areas. The rocks are slippery, obviously. It had rained on the first a couple days before, so I would assume that it's probably a little higher than you would find it in July on a typical year now. So it'd be a little higher. By the time you get to July 3rd, they've pretty much figured out where you can walk across it, and that sort of thing. But they did unload the boxes, put them in either blankets or whatever, and held them up on the end of their guns, put them on the bayonets and held them up. Okay. So if they did slip or, had a problem, they wouldn't drop them in the water type of thing. So
I shouldn't say I never heard that. I didn't remember, if I did hear it, that they would fire into the trees just to get them to duck so they could run up in place.
That's what they did, just fire a volley and switch it out.
Huh.
Yeah.
So the back, because when you're driving through there, and again, this is why I always encourage people to get out and walk around while you're allowed to.
Yes.
When you're driving
stay
up
off the grass.
Right. But get out of the car. Just stay off the grass. Right. So when you're driving up the road and you're looking out, you can't really see down the slope on the other side of the breastworks, right? So it's hard to imagine that running from the 6th Corps monuments to the breastworks, that you would take many casualties because the Confederates must be shooting plumb up into the air.
Yeah, well, of course they're on the lesser hill, and they can fire more direct into it.
So they're receiving fire from
all the way along the line there. Yeah,
and it's important, I guess, to remember that a musket's range is what, 375, 400 yards, something like that.
It'll throw at 1,000, but if you hit anything at that distance, it's purely
it's just
accidental.
Lucky. Yeah, but if you got everybody to
you could kill it over 300 yards with a Civil War musket. The trick is trying to hit the target at that distance.
But if you're massing your troops and firing a volley at a mass of troops,
and we got the account of the 150th New York. When they go in their new regiment, they hadn't been in combat really before. They'd gone to join the army. They got to Baltimore. They said, "You're going too far south." I said, "What do you mean?" Well, the battle's in Pennsylvania. So they had to turn around and march north to catch up. So they're kind of new to all this this fighting stuff. The thing about it is newer regiments have more vivid memories.
Sure.
Okay. If you've been in the battle for 2 years, you're numb.
Right. Yeah. It all bleeds together.
Yeah. You just say, well, we came, we shot them and they shot back and we held the ground. Some of the reports are terribly non-descriptive or uninteresting.
It's like how we were just saying in the back that you go out to the restaurants around town too often, they all taste the same. It's same idea.
Same menu.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyhow, so that's it. So these regiments like the 150th, the Eastern Shore, these guys have really some detailed accounts of the fighting there. And there were actually, in Fonz's book, he says 3 guys in the 150th were killed with the same bullet. Okay, went through 3 of them.
Interesting.
It was not true. It's only 2.
Okay.
He went through 2. The 3rd guy was happy he wasn't involved, but both of those guys are buried in the National Cemetery in the New York section.
Okay.
Okay, and they were hit with the same bullet, so they're massed in there, and bullets are, and I'm sure you can find some occasion, maybe with the Confederates, though they'd be more spread out in amongst the trees and rocks.
Yeah.
The Union are more concentrated behind the breastworks, but like I said, it's probably when they were advancing to relieve the line that these guys were hit with the same bullet.
Moving back a little bit down more to like Shaler's right.
Okay, sure.
Right, and if they're maybe receiving fire, long distance fire from guys on Lower Culp's Hill,
right?
I just can't imagine. Do you ever, I mean, you've been studying this for what, 40, 50, 60, 80 years, something like that, right?
At least 30.
At least 30, okay. And so you're like, knee deep in this stuff for a long time. But did you ever just get to a point where you're just like, how the F did anybody survive this? With all the lead and iron flying around.
Yes, and you could say that about...
And branches.
Yeah, oh yeah, and don't forget the branches.
Yeah.
But there was accounts where the bullets were literally pulverized by hitting the rocks.
Yeah.
And when they did the archaeological dig there, what was that, 4 years ago, I guess now, they found bullets that were literally flattened out from hitting the rocks.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I dug them up myself.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
you got to go do
one?
that. Yeah.
No, I had to turn them in. I was under adult supervision.
Of course. That's the only way they would let you do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
They had the little flags out where they found the lead.
Well, that was cool. I remember when, you would go up there and you'd see all these little flags.
White flags, yeah.
Yeah, white flags dotting the breastworks.
And that's where they found
And I remember you telling me that's what that was. And I was like, wow, that really... It's almost like it's just a kind of like you're there the next day and you're seeing the dirt all dug up and everything from the bullets and everything.
It was a revelation.
Yeah,
it really was.
And who knows? I mean, I would imagine that over the years, maybe not, because I know in other parts of the battlefield over the years, private citizens have unearthed stuff and they went into collections. I'm sure stuff over there before it was verboten has been removed from the ground. So that's just what's left that you guys found, right?
It's just bullets. I mean, they were from buttons, and I think they found part of a pistol. But most of the big stuff is gone.
Yeah.
It's already been discovered, so to speak, there. But it was just bullets. And the thing that was interesting to me was that if you go, let me think here, say the 150th New York, Dutchess County Regiment, and you walk and you look at the breastworks, okay? You look down to your right, there's rocks there.
Yeah.
Okay? Those are the same rocks that are in the photograph taken by Brady.
Right.
10 days after the battle, because my battle's 4 days, so it'd be 11 days after your battle.
Okay.
Okay, so it's those rocks have not been moved since July 2nd, 1863. Haven't been moved.
Right.
And the archaeologist at the time, his name was Eric, he told me that that's the only breastwork on the entire battlefield that hasn't either been reconstructed or rebuilt.
Huh.
The only thing that's there is the dirt accumulated over the years, but those rocks in that breastwork are the same rocks in the photograph that was taken by Brady.
I know Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill were among the earlier parts of the battlefield that were purchased and visited by tourists and stuff.
Right.
Do you think it's because of that? Because it was something that was grabbed relatively early compared to all the other pieces of ground?
They did get Little Round Top early, too.
Okay.
Okay, the key to Culp's Hill and Little Round Top, Cemetery Hill is accessible. Mm-hmm. It's on the Baltimore Pike. I mean, it's right off there.
So it literally goes right through the middle of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's you want to develop an area, put an interstate through it. You got to have transportation. You got to have accessibility.
Sure.
And Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill were accessible. Little Round Top was a stretch at that time, given the transportation of the day, so to speak. Furthermore, on Culp's Hill, you can see the damage. Mm-hmm. The trees were just shot to pieces.
Yeah.
There was one tree didn't have any bark on it. It shot the bark right off of it. And there were there were trees that had shells stuck in them.
Yeah.
It's just like after 9/11, you didn't go to New York City and marvel that the Empire State Building was still standing. You went and looked at the hole that was the World Trade Center.
Correct.
That's the way Americans are. I don't know why we're that way, but we just are drawn to disaster.
We are.
And
do you think it's an American thing or is it a human thing?
I don't know. It might be a human thing.
I feel like it is because we can't imagine things not being there. Like the biggest trauma not the biggest, but one of the lasting traumas to me of 9/11 being that I grew up outside of New York.
Oh yeah.
And I always saw, from various points, I could always see the skyline.
Sure.
And I always, it was unmistakable. You had the Empire State Building and the Twin Towers, right?
Yes.
And Well, it would be flipped, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
okay. So from your perspective, if you're me, and one day they were gone.
Yeah.
And so my friend and I that December went into New York to go and see, I think they were calling it the Hole at the time.
Yeah.
And to see the area. And it's, I think when it's such a huge cataclysmic, devastating event, some of us have to see it to believe it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And we also, it's just this, it's a morbid curiosity we have. If I were alive during the Civil War and I wasn't in the war, I would have been one of those civilians coming here to see those trees. Because I can't imagine.
Or the dead bodies.
No, I don't think I'd want to see.
People came to see that. I mean, initially to see the destruction.
Yeah,
I think they were just curious. I mean,
well, I guess you're not used to you're
not used to it, right?
You're not used to, death we're so detached from death now because somebody dies, they go from the hospital to the morgue or the funeral home and, they're taken care of. And then they're all pretty in a box. But back then, like it was the family that had to do all that stuff and put them in the box and put them in the hole in the ground and everything. So death wasn't such a weird thing, but mass death with people ripped to shreds laying on a field, that might have been the oddity that people weren't used to. Go ahead, Mike.
Look at how popular the photos of the dead were. That was the big industry.
Yeah. Battle dead, it's a different thing. I don't know. That's interesting. How did we get on this? What were we talking about?
The trees.
The trees. Yes.
So and they were shot up, and that 18 acres of ground right in front of Green's trench line is probably the key ground.
Yeah.
To that hill. That's the ground that they cleared 4 years ago to try and make it more understandable to visitors. The problem was they didn't maintain it. Okay,
right.
Weeds grow. You got to maintain it.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And they're not planning to.
That's a shame.
So it's only going to get worse. So if you want to see it, come soon. Okay. You can't really see it anymore from the road in the summer because they let it grow up around the trenches there. Right. And a couple reasons for that. One, they don't really have the manpower, I guess, to keep it clear. And two, they don't want you walking on the trenches anyway. So let's let the poison ivy and the briar bushes grow. God's barbed wire. And that'll keep people off of it. But you can still walk down and take a look up at this time of the year and see the beauty of Green's defensive line. It's like the seawall at Normandy. It's abrupt. Okay, it's gradual from Rock Creek up, and then all of a sudden it just jumps right up in front of you, like the white cliffs of Dover.
It is crazy imposing. I always tell people if they take the East Confederate Avenue going south, this time of year, and they stop right before where that little bridge is, the stone wall.
Yep.
And you look up at the top of Culp's Hill. It looks like it's like I cannot believe it's that high and that sharp of a drop.
It is steep.
It almost looks like it's out of a movie. Like it's made like there should be a castle on the top of the hill, like Dracula's castle. Yeah, we have a tower instead. We have a call. Sharon is on the air, and she would like to ask you a question.
Okay,
Sharon, hello.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good. How are you? Good to hear from you.
Okay. I think you might have partially answered my question just in the last couple of minutes, but I'll maybe ask it and then maybe get clarification. It was how much doesn't the hill look like it did in the time of the battle? Just like Little Round Top before the renovation. And I guess because of tree growth and undergrowth and bushes and whatever. And then I guess you said 4 years ago they did something. My second question was that if it doesn't look like it, do they have any plans like Little Round Top to make it, number one, look more like it did in the during the battle, and two, to give better access to people to visit it and see it?
Okay, good question. The plan 4 years ago was to make it more accessible and make it look more like it did. Now, we do have photographs that show us what it was like. At the time, a lot of mature trees, no undergrowth. Okay? And that was the plan, and that started out in February 4 years ago. So it'd be 4 years ago this coming February. They cleared it out all the way down to the Forbes Rock, which sits at the base there of Culp's Hill, and they put in walking trails and a couple of 3 waysides to make it more understandable. Then the plan was to continue that clearing down to Rock Creek, and then clear the northwestern face of the hill so you could see its proximity to Cemetery Hill. All right, so that was all in the plan. However, what happens, of course, is that there's this movement now to protect and preserve the natural resources, which means if you make it more accessible, people are going to walk on the grass, and they're going to impact the natural resources. So that's part of it. The other part of it is the Park Service doesn't have a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of help. I mean, they're cutting, I think, 11 positions this year.
Wow.
And so the plan was scrapped, and there is no plan to even maintain what has already been done. It's unfortunate, but that's what's happening. One of the keys to understanding why it was done in the first place was that the reason you had to rehab Little Round Top is people use it too much. All right, so it's being loved to death.
Oh, please stop saying that.
I know. That's a park thing.
Yeah, I know.
But anyhow, people are, and so they had to close it to fix it. And the idea was if we make Culp's Hill more interesting to the visitor, more accessible to the visitor, maybe more visitors would go to Culp's Hill and leave Little Round Top alone. That was the assumption, because obviously people, when they come to Gettysburg, whether they've been here once or they've been here 101 times, Little Round Top's on their itinerary.
Yeah.
You
got to look at the view.
So if you can get them interested in Culp's Hill, and that's a real problem with Culp's Hill, it's very, it rivals Little Round Top in all aspects except for the view. Mm-hmm. If you want the view there, you have to earn it.
Yeah.
You have to go 97 steps and up that tower.
Yeah.
And now you got the view.
No thanks.
So
Go ahead.
Didn't that happen during the shutdown of Little Round Top, that the Culp's Hill visitation went up?
Sharon, I'm not real sure.
No?
I think it did. I saw more people over there than I had in the past, though it was not the volume they expected.
Or hoped.
Or hoped for, let's put it that way. Yeah. And there's still some people going there, curious individuals that are coming. And one of the problems with it is, you park at the tower and there's 3 trails, three trailheads. Which one do you use? I remember when they first opened it 3.5 years ago, I was up there and Matt Atkinson was doing a Culp's Hill walk, and he says, "Charlie, which trail should I use?" I said, "Pick one. Pick the one in the middle." So that's another problem with it. It's a shame that it wasn't continued in the way it was. The money was there. It's just that the desire was not.
And with the grass, like you said, you didn't want people walking on the grass.
Right.
But that problem was solved, I assume, or hopefully solved with Little Round Top by those graveled, nice flat trails that they put in.
Yes, the
and
aggregates.
They could do that at Culp's Hill, but you said they don't have the money. Is that why they're not doing that at Culp's Hill?
Yeah, that's part of it.
Well, they had the money.
They had the money to clear and do that. I mean, there was money put in escrow, so to speak, to utilize to keep the hill cleared. But they get back to the manpower thing. They don't have the manpower to do it. And then they get back to, when you're clearing it, you're taking down trees and that sort of thing and cutting shrubbery, and that could be habitats for for animals of some kind or another. I know that they believe there's spotted owls nesting on Culp's Hill there. So the spotted owls are more important than remembering the men and women that fought and died for what they believe in.
For the spotted owl's freedom.
Yes.
What if you have the money, then how do you not have the manpower?
Yeah,
Can't you afford the manpower if you have the money?
Well, I don't think they were willing to subcontract. Okay. Yeah. So that's a whole lot of paper.
Well, that probably makes sense because you have to handle it a certain way. It's not like you're just mowing somebody's lawn. This is.
And I'm not talking from knowledge here. I'm just speculating.
Sure. Yeah. That's all we have because nobody answers.
Is that what they did with Little Round Top? Is that what they did with Little Round Top?
Yes.
They subcontracted.
Yes, they did.
All of those trails and all of the excavation and everything like that.
Yeah, that wasn't done by the Park Service.
They would need to do that. Yeah.
Although they were very much involved. Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just to get back to the history.
Sure.
The day of the battle. And I apologize, I'm not real clear on this, but okay, so it's a hill, so it's got 360. I mean, it's got all sides to it. You can go around in a circle on it.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But the attack was up from the little portion, and then they got up to the sort of like there's a shoulder or something like that.
Sure.
And so the attack was at one part of that 360 all around the hill. But now that was a different part of the hill. If you go round the hill to the back or whatever, is that where Marsh Creek is? And also, what is the supply route that was so endangered? Is that Baltimore Pike?
Yeah, the Baltimore Pike is the main supply line for the Union Army. Is that around the
back side?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's around the back, a different side of the hill. Was there anybody coming up there?
Well, no, because the Union were in the way.
Okay, all right. So it was all on that one side of the hill.
Yeah, they have to come across the northeastern side of the hill to be successful. The ability to flank that hill would be probably very difficult to achieve because Lee would have to stretch his line almost to the breaking point, and that would uncover, in a sense, his main supply line and route would be the Chambersburg Pike. So he had to be conscious of that.
It's sort of the same about... Same idea as not being able to get around. There was an attack up sort of one side of Little Round Top rather than getting around to the other side and coming up that side. But that was not possible. Same reason. Okay. And then this has always haunted me because I read somewhere about it and now I can't remember where and I don't know the details. So maybe you can, I'm sure you can answer it.
Hope so.
Somewhere or other, I believe it was on Culp's Hill that day, but I'm not sure. There's like the Lost Regiment. They wandered off. Remind me. I think it was Culp's Hill, wasn't it? Where they wandered off the wrong end of it, and they wandered off, and then they straggled back and wandered back. They got lost completely. They straggled back after the fighting. Am I making something up here?
No, that was Geary Division. When Williams was ordered to support Sickles on July 2nd. It's around 6:30 in the evening, which is add an hour to it. He marches his division off and told Geary to occupy the line that his men were vacating. Okay, while Williams is gone, about half an hour later, Geary is ordered to follow. And so Geary marches his division off, except for Greene, who was allowed to stay. And they're following the route that Williams took down the Baltimore Pike. And they missed the turn at the Granite Schoolhouse Lane, and they marched off the battlefield. Yeah,
and off they wandered.
Yes, they wandered off. Now, Kane hears the firing on Culp's Hill behind him, and he will turn his 3 regiments around and march to the sound of the guns. And Geary, with Candy's brigade, will march across Rock Creek, and there he decided to maybe wait for developments because he knew that he was marching off the battlefield, but he wasn't sure where he was supposed to go because it's dark now.
There's not too many humorous events in the 3 days of the Battle of Gettysburg, but that's one of them.
Yes. I always tell people, how the guys are with maps. It's a guy thing. They get lost, but they're never lost. They know exactly where they are.
Yeah, we're just exploring.
That's pretty much Geary. He thought he was following Williams' division, and what it turned out to be were stragglers that were leaving the battlefield. And in the darkness, he just thought it was the tail end of Williams' division, so he followed them. Down the Baltimore Pike.
If his wife had been with him, she'd be yelling at him, "Where the hell are you going?"
That's probably true.
Stop and ask for directions.
Probably true. Yeah. We don't ask for directions. And then he was brought back on the 3rd. They came and found him, and then brought Candy back.
So thank you very much for your time.
Well, good questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. It's good to hear your voice.
Yes.
Hey, Matt, I just want one more thing, and this is for you, and then I'll go. And this is what you should do, because you're supposed to take advice from people who have your best interests at heart.
Correct, and you do.
Every single podcast, because every other single podcaster, and I listen to a lot of them, history and otherwise, does this. And every single podcast, they come on and they say something to the effect of, and I'm going to say it for this podcast, and I encourage you to say it every single podcast, because it works.
Go ahead.
If you like this podcast and what we're doing here, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming interesting history podcasts here at Addressing Gettysburg. It really helps the channel, and it's completely free. That's the best thing. It's completely free. Please help us make our goal of 25,000 subscribers by Memorial Day. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I'm putting that in a promo.
Yeah.
Every single podcast, you need to do that. Every other podcaster, YouTuber does it.
You're absolutely right, Sharon. I have to tell you, and no one's going to believe this, but I'm a little too modest for that. But I will start doing it, because you're right. That is what works. I don't know why it doesn't work on me.
You can play my record until you get over your modesty. You can play my recording.
I will. I'd rather have recordings of listeners saying that than me. I think it says more.
It's more impactful.
I agree. And Absolutely. Charlie, I'll have Charlie do it too.
Okay, I could do it.
All right.
There you go. Record it and do it. Okay. Thanks very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the call, Sharon. Thank you for your support, of course. Okay, so let's finish off July 3rd.
Yes.
On Culp's Hill, and then we'll go to a commercial, and we'll come back for the question. So go ahead. Okay. What the hell happened?
Well, as I said once, a lot of shooting. So you have the attempts, at least 3 concerted attempts by the Confederates to take Greene's position that he had on the 2nd, the upper hill. Mm-hmm. Okay, and they were all repulsed with severe losses. The final assault was the attack off the lesser hill, trying to break through and around Greene's line, which led to the action in Pardee Field. As soon as they enter Pardee Field, they're in direct line of sight of the artillery along the Baltimore Pike, Powers Hill, and only it was the Maryland Confederate infantry unit and some of Daniel's men, I believe, from North Carolina, that breached the breastworks to their right, that made the most, let's say, the furthest advance. But they weren't able to break through at that point. So that pretty much ended the fighting. From the Confederate point of view, they knew 2 things: one, they can't stay, and 2, they can't go forward. So and this is around noon, roughly 11 to noon, somewhere in that time frame, that they realized this was a mission impossible.
Yeah.
Daniels pronounced it probably the best defensive position that he had ever seen. Mm-hmm. And so basically they start to withdraw from Culp's Hill at that point. If you look at the fighting on Culp's Hill, and this is something that I sometimes emphasize, a lot of times I emphasize on my tours to some degree, the amount of lead that was fired there on July 3rd. Okay, and basically roughly 18 acres, most of it was fired. That's where all those trees were shot to pieces. How many bullets are fired on Culp's Hill on July 3rd? It's a good question. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
But me. And that's because I counted the holes in the trees. And so I know how many bullets are fired.
Okay.
Okay, there's 1,526,500 bullets fired on Culp's Hill. Over 800,000 for the Union, over 600,000 for the Confederates. And how I figured that out was Geary in his report put in his report that his men fired 277,000 bullets on Culp's Hill on July 3rd. He's got roughly a little over 3,000 men. I think I put the figure around 3,300. So if 3,300 men can fire 277,000, how many can 24,000 fire? And the answer is 1,526,500. Now, we estimate about 7 million bullets are fired in the entire battle. Here in 7 hours of close combat on July 3rd, you have over 1.5 million bullets fired. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the intensity of the fighting. The fact that the casualties are low doesn't reflect the lack of shooting. Okay,
Right,
it reflects that these guys have cover.
Right.
And even still, they're getting hit. As one guy said, the bullets were coming in so fast, he said they were hitting the breastworks, and some of them would hit the headlog and deflect down into the lower body of the men behind the breastworks. So even being behind the breastworks does not guarantee your safety.
God, and you're getting that like angled path in there, so that's just tearing you up.
Yep.
God Almighty.
Yeah.
And we talked about this when we were doing our Culp's Hill show yesterday.
Okay.
Was it like majority or a large percentage of head and neck wounds because of that?
Yeah, you're going to find, especially in the Union.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're sticking their heads up, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So you would have lower body injuries due to what I just said, and also the fact that they're running back and forth.
Right.
So there we have it. The majority of the wounds were upper body.
As for artillery on or firing at Culp's Hill, upper Culp's Hill,
right?
Not really.
No.
Any to speak of.
What they're firing is, if you follow the Union line, they're firing up Rock Creek. Is basically what they're firing up.
Because that's their line. That's their clear shot.
Sight, and they're firing up there, and that's where the Confederates are. If they're not on the front line, they're massing there. Daniels requested to move his brigade to get it into a position where he was not subjected to that artillery fire.
Okay. Also less wooded down there.
Yeah,
back then.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, we have the photograph to prove it.
Right.
Yeah.
You could see that it's a wide open.
Yeah. Along the creek, you'd probably have some brush.
But no big trees like there are today. It's not all wooded like it is now.
No. Well, the problem is the big trees are not the big problem. No pun intended. But it's the brush underneath.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be there. Now, when they cleared Culp's Hill, good intentions. Okay, when they cleared the hill, they cleared out a lot of the cover, foliage.
Sure.
More sun hits it, more growth.
Right. They should have salted it. That's what they should have done.
Oh, you can't do that. It's environment.
Right.
It's environmental. Yeah. So
salt's from the environment.
Yeah. So they actually, just for your information, for those that like to sit at long lights and laugh, think about using goats.
Yeah.
They actually seriously consider goats. They would get a goat, put a chain around his neck, hook him to a tractor tire filled with cement, throw it in the woods, and come back in a couple weeks.
Really? That's how they were going to do it? Yeah, but the problem would be that you would have people getting bitten by him or something, or people hurting the goat because people are idiots.
You'd have to have a goat herder.
Yeah. You would have to have somebody watching it.
You would, absolutely.
Yeah, which is impractical.
Well, it was the cost.
Yeah. Couldn't you do, it's probably just as expensive or more, couldn't you do like 2 barbed wire fences, right? One to keep the public out and one to keep the goats away from the public's fence.
It's possible.
So like, you got a buffer zone there and the goats, and then you just move it when you need them to clear different areas.
You could possibly do that.
I think it would be easier to salt it. That's what I say, right? Okay. So, everything is over there. How about Confederates? What are their casualties? Give me the casualties. Do we have them broken up by day, or is it just no?
The one I use, of course, the 12th Corps. I mean, Williams will take incidental losses as he goes to help Sickles. I think Geary's divisions will suffer like 13% losses.
Okay.
Green's higher because of the second day and being accosted by numerous Confederates. You're looking at around low. The 12th, only the 6th Corps suffered less losses at Gettysburg than the 12th Corps.
Okay.
Okay, and the Confederate losses, to give you an idea, and numbers are beyond me there, but if you look at Johnson's division, Allegheny Johnson, his division will suffer in the fighting on Culp's Hill. Now, he's in there for like 11 hours. He will suffer the same, pretty much comparable losses to Pickett. Now, Pickett did it in 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, except for what we call, missing. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are captured, right?
Right.
But if you look at killed and wounded, his division is suffering the same losses in killed and wounded, roughly the same that Pickett's division suffered in Pickett's charge.
Was that 45-ish?
Yeah, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if I figured it out, I think Johnson's division will suffer more losses than the U.S. military took in the Spanish-American War combat losses.
Really?
Yeah, just there on Culp's Hill.
Oh, my God.
So it was, for his division, which is on the attack.
Right.
And moving forward, not hunkered down behind breastworks the whole time. They get shot up pretty good.
And for the dog, we'll end with this one. For the dog lovers out there,
Yes.
tell the story of, I don't know if she actually has a name. I've heard Sadie. I've heard other.
I like Gracie.
Gracie, that's not Sadie, Gracie. Yeah, tell the story of Gracie.
Well, Gracie, my take on Gracie is that she was a farm dog. And as the Confederates were moving through Maryland, she came down and barked at the men, and they gave her salt pork. Now, she's the only volunteer in the Confederate Army at Gettysburg.
Okay.
Okay, because all the volunteers were drafted in 1862.
Okay.
So she joined the regiment, and away she goes. And during the final charge across Pardee Field, the 1st Maryland, they have that great sketch of the attack, and there's Gracie out in front, leading the charge. Of course, didn't go well for Gracie. She was wounded, and Kane, who commanded Kane's brigade, obviously Thomas Kane, he noticed the dog was licking wounded Confederates. And he thought she was doing that to try and alleviate their suffering. She's probably doing it because she was thirsty and needed salt. That's
right.
But anyway, he thought that was very compassionate. And later on, during the barrage and Pickett's charge, a lot of the shells were flying into Culp's Hill. Mm-hmm. And he noticed that the dog was killed, he said, by friendly fire, by Confederate artillery fire. And so when they went to bury the Union dead, he ordered Gracie to be buried with his men with full military honors. And I think he said, as the only Christian-minded being on the field.
Yeah.
He said all the men were here trying to kill one another. Here was a dog trying to alleviate their suffering.
Yeah. I'm glad you told that because I always get welled up when I tell that story. I can't tell that story. It's a great story. Yeah. All right. So what we'll do is we'll take a break. We've got some calls lined up. So if you're on the line, hold on. We'll get to you in a second. Otherwise, we'll also read some questions submitted by our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. That's how we keep the show going most of all, and that's how you get to participate in things like Ask a Gettysburg Guide and other stuff. Oh my God, the other stuff. So we'll be right back after these words.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com. Here's what's coming to our Patreon channel in 2025.
So He wouldn't say, like, what
This is part of the myth making, right?
Right.
Right. He's also not called the Gray Ghost during the war.
Is that true?
I can't find any evidence that anyone used that term. I think it comes about in the 20th century, and we really see it take off with the TV show in the 20th century. But I can find no newspaper reference or book reference from the 19th century calling him the Gray Ghost.
Amazing. It's popular culture and what it does.
Isn't it weird
right?
what it does?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but I mean, what a great name, though.
It is. Yeah.
So, okay, but now, he gets in the papers.
Okay.
He gets promoted because of this. What?
And Stewart issues a statement that he wants to be read to every regiment in the Army of Northern Virginia Cavalry that lauds the daring and audacity of
because he doesn't just get the general; he gets horses and other things.
He gets
right?
horses. He captures about 30 men, their horses.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah,
for
not bad.
9 guys or 10 guys,
and it's more than 9 at this point. It's about 20 because he's had men. But right,
yeah,
right.
You're getting into a general's bedroom,
right?
Like, that's pretty good.
Somebody asked me, they said, "Okay, how does this pay compare to the civilian world?"
That was okay. Good. Yes.
You're going to ask how
yes, that was given.
If I'm a private in the Union Army, what could I make? You know, as a laborer or a farmhand, and those are the 2 really most common occupations. He's laborer, farmland. Okay, you know, if I stay a civilian, and fortunately, you know, if it takes a little bit of digging, which you can find it, because in the 1860 census, they frequently will list, okay, this is what occupations are, this is how much the guy's being paid. And it varies widely from state to state. It varies considerably north versus south, logically enough, because you have, of course, the slave labor available in the south. But on average, a farmhand in 1860 is going to make $14 a month.
Okay.
So that's right in line.
So yeah, right. So
and that could very well be why the Army increased their pay to $13 a month to compete.
So a little background then. We're talking about this idea that Longstreet's attack on the left, which ultimately would result in battles around the Peach Orchard, the Wheat Field, Little Round Top, Devil's Den, etc. That whole movement was meant to be executed right at dawn, according to Early, and it was supposed to be carried out by Longstreet's Corps. But as you point out, I believe Longstreet's Corps, Longstreet himself is there like on the evening of the 1st, and then his corps starts to trickle in throughout the night. They're delayed by Johnson's division, I believe, from Ewell's Corps. So Longstreet's Corps has to kind of wait while they filter onto the road and get into town. So they're a little bit delayed, so they're not going to get here in time for the first day. But they're still not up in full, or even in the 2/3 that will end up launching that attack by dawn. So this claim from Early that it's supposed to happen at dawn is ridiculous. I don't know why people didn't Google it back then. But obviously there's no Google, so people have to believe it, right? Because why would this guy lie?
Right. The war's like 1,000%, but they're losing their way past redeeming. So
are you saying then that when people lose their faith in the government, they save their money instead of spend it? Or what causes the inflation? I mean, the
scarcity of goods versus monetary value and confidence in the government to be able to do what it does.
Okay.
So if I'm not confident, if we go to thermonuclear war with Iran, which I don't think we hope we don't do, McDonald's hamburgers might go up to $20.
You don't want to miss out on all that, do you? Of course you don't. Go to patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg, support the show, and learn a whole lot more.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
Okay. And we're back with Charlie Fennell talking about July 3rd on Culp's Hill. Culp's Hill, on July 3rd. Let's put it that way. I think that's the better way to go. And we had a good let me start this again, okay? Okay, and we're back. And we've got Charlie Fennell here. We're talking about Culp's herd on a herding bird.
Take five.
Flip it down.
Take 17.
Take 17.
Tip it down, tip it say, sip it all. Okay, ready? And we're back with Charlie Fennell. We're talking about Culp's Hill on July 3rd. And we've got our questions from our patrons here. But I have someone who's been waiting very patiently on the phone line. And I know it's a pain in the butt to listen to the show while on hold. So I'm going to get to him right now. Rich Snyder, you're on the air. Go ahead, sir. And then, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're planning on calling in or you want to call in, the number 717-420-1978. Give us a call while we're doing this, and we'll get to you once I see your name in the queue. Go ahead, Rich.
Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, and a happy New Year to you, and a happy New Year to Charlie.
Likewise.
Happy New Year.
I have a question for Charlie, Matt, and it kind of goes back a little bit to yesterday's episode about Little Round Top.
Okay.
Charlie yesterday was talking about when Warren was up on Little Round Top with the Signal Corps, that the Signal Corps actually saw the Confederates moving to what would be the Union right at the time, that I'm assuming they would have been notifying Meade headquarters. Does Charlie think that had any influence with Meade proposing an offensive attack from Culp's Hill?
Okay, yeah. Did the recon or the signal station noticing the Confederates moving to the right have any impact on Meade's decision or a desire perhaps to order an offensive on the Union right? Well, one of the things to keep in mind is that they saw him in the early afternoon, around noon, or early afternoon. He was contemplating attacking in the morning. Okay, but I would suggest to you that perhaps this just reinforced his belief that his most vulnerable spot was the right. And maybe that's why he would tend to ignore Sickles' inquiries about where he should be to the point where it got to be too late and Sickles made a decision to move forward. So, I think it did have some impact on his thought process, his decision-making to some degree. And perhaps that also contributed to his belief that maybe we should attack. He sanctioned the attack at dawn on the 3rd. Yes.
Okay, super.
That it, Rich?
That's the only question I had, Matt, was the timing of that.
Yeah.
When the signal station saw those guys.
Okay.
That's I really appreciate the show, guys.
All right. Thanks, Rich. We appreciate you. Have a good one.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's move on now to the questions submitted by our patrons. We're going to start with Kevin Secula, and he says, was the Union artillery the deciding factor to holding the position on Culp's Hill on July 3rd?
Deciding factor may be a little strong. They certainly contributed to the defense. They prevented the Confederates from flanking to the left, going around that way because they'd run right into that artillery fire. Certainly, as we talked when we mentioned Little Round Top and Hazlitt's battery, it would encourage the Union defenders, except the ones being hit by friendly fire. But it would give them knowing that the artillery was backing them up. I think that helped their morale and what I would call stability. Okay.
Robert Fry says he's got 3 questions here. 3 questions, Fry. He says, what was Neal's brigade's impact on the offensive? Was his presence important to the end result, or did it have no impact on the outcome? Neal's brigade. So Neal Avenue, also known as Lost Avenue.
Right.
not inaccessible, but hard to access nowadays. You can't just drive up to it like you can other places. Where for people who don't know, where is Neal Avenue in relation to Culp's Hill, and what's the story with Neal's Brigade?
Okay, Neal Avenue is, let me get oriented here, be east of Culp's Hill. It's it would be north of the Baltimore Pike. Once you cross Rock Creek, there on your left, which would be the northern part of Baltimore Pike, that would be where Neal Avenue is.
Okay.
It's above what was known as the Baker Farm at the time. Okay, so it sits up there. It was the extreme right of the Union infantry line, and Neal was sent up there, let's say on July, certainly by the morning of the 3rd, he was sent there to prevent any kind of Confederate movement around Wolf Hill. So he would be essentially on Wolf Hill, which is the hill adjacent to Culp's Hill on the other side of Rock Creek. They did not participate in any of the Union attacks or defense of Culp's Hill per se, but they were there to prevent the Confederates from maybe trying to flank Culp's Hill by going around Rock Creek.
So kind of guarding the flank.
They were guarding the flank, and they did have some action. I think this was the 2nd Virginia that was up there, the Walker's Brigade. So they did have there. And one of their regiments was, that was the 77th New York. They got rid of their kilts by this time. It's the 77th New York Highlanders. They were left on Powers Hill to support the artillery.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're in support, basically.
The kilt must have been nice during the summer, though.
Yes. Well, they had the kilt and then they had the knee socks.
Right. The socks must have been a pain in the butt. But all right. And then he also says, how effective was the Union artillery in hitting their targets? I recall a story about one of the members of the 20th Connecticut threatening to shoot the gunners if they didn't stop hitting them. That's what we talked about before. Number 3, otherwise, how effective was it?
I think it was very effective in the sense that it kept the Confederates from, massing for a general assault in that area. Furthermore, it kept them under, pretty much under cover, so to speak. So they couldn't, move to try and attack across Spangler's Meadow,
right? Which
would have been an option to try and get around the upper hill.
That's a good point. It made them think twice, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Number 3, I've always been under the impression that the July 3rd offensive didn't have a lasting impact on the rest of the battle. Lee still moved forward with Pickett's charge later on despite this action. Am I interpreting that correctly or am I wrong? I'm very happy to be wrong, as I like to learn. I like that.
The offensive, basically was tied down attention and resources in the morning. Now, Lee was already at that time making alternate plans if it didn't be successful. So he was in the process of planning Pickett's charge while the fight for Culp's Hill was going on. Mm-hmm. Remember, that was his principal idea, was to attack both ends of the Union line at the same time, simultaneous at dawn, and it didn't happen.
Right.
So Ewell was left on his own hook for 7 hours over there by himself, and you don't take a salient by attacking one side. You take it by attacking both sides so they can't move resources back and forth on interior lines, which is what Lee's plan was designed to prevent, and it didn't. Okay, so basically the attack there had the failure of the attack necessitated Pickett's charge. If that attack is successful, Pickett's charge is Pickett's pursuit of a defeated Union Army. Okay, so that was the impact. It was more for Lee to see if that would be successful, and if it was, so much the better.
I know this. We try to avoid these questions, but do you think if he was able to pierce the center, would it have really accomplished anything except for maybe losing Pickett's division in its entirety?
If you look at the reports, and I figured this out one time when I was younger, you're looking at over 7,000 Union troops moving to the center.
Yeah.
Most of those have not been in combat. Okay, so they're fresh.
So no, that wouldn't have helped.
You can bring the other 2 brigades from Virginia, of course, and Ransom, and it's still not going to happen.
Still not going to do it.
It's only going to work if the Yankees are willing to run.
And they didn't seem willing to run during this battle.
They might have ran in Virginia. They're pretty fast in Virginia, but they're not going to run in Pennsylvania.
Right.
They're not doing it.
Nicholas Afalter says, please describe the significance of the position and actions of the 66th Ohio on Culp's Hill. Also, please explain the controversy of the marker at the center of the regiment's line in regard to the wounding of Major Joshua G. Palmer.
Yeah. Okay. The 66 will report to the top of the hill on the evening of the second morning of the third. They're part of Candy's brigade. When they come back, and the guy was up there, you couldn't see a thing, and he told an officer that his mission was, once the artillery opened fire, he was to get across the breastworks, form perpendicular to them, and fire into the Confederate mast in front of Geary's position. Okay, so that was it. And the man said, oh, good God, young man, don't you realize the Confederates are right out there? They'll gobble you up. Okay. And the only one that can say that in the dark to anybody is Greene, because he's the oldest general in the Union Army. So I think he reported to Greene. And certainly as the artillery fire opens, the 66th Ohio does swing over, the breastworks and fired into the Confederates massed essentially in the area of the Forbes Rocks in that area. They were taking fire from a stone wall, and that'd be the stone wall down along the East Confederate.
Okay.
That's there perpendicular to East Confederate, and that'd be Jones' brigade.
Yeah.
And Jones's men were firing up into them from there. It's probably this fire that maybe brought down Palmer. And Palmer... there in the middle, I know what you're saying, because their flank marker is way over on a nice rock. It's a really nice place to go and just sit and be by yourself.
I've done that, yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. And it's got a great view. So, yeah, Palmer, they probably put it there essentially so that it was accessible. That, people want to know where Palmer fell, so they put it there so you can see it. I mean, you just go down the hill a certain way, and there it was. I know at one point, I think I read an account where they said that was the left flank. Of the regiment at one time. That could very well be, I don't know, but that was part of the controversy, is where they put that marker. And the major typically is on the left flank of the regiment.
For those of you out there who have not gone and walked down to the 66th Ohio's monument, you should.
Yeah.
And not necessarily for their monument, but you should do it because you get an idea. Earlier we were talking about that part of the hill and what basically a cliff it is. Yeah. Just a little bit northish of that spot is what we were talking about, but you can get a sense of it there. Right. And you can really see, honestly, anywhere on that hill, I'd rather be there or like kind of where the 7th Indiana Monument is or something. I'd rather be up there because nobody's coming straight up at you. No. You can't do it.
They tried it the day before and didn't work.
No. And so Jones, during the July 3rd, is he just kind of in a holding position there?
I think he is. I don't think he participates in the assaults.
So he's just kind of lobbing shots and stuff.
Yeah, he's in support there, but he doesn't make a concerted effort to try and take the hill.
Okay.
Even in conjunction with the reinforcements that came in, like Daniels, Walker, those guys make an attack there in the morning of the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Eric. Okay. Eric Houston. He says, how did Meade's defensive posture impact his decision making regarding launching a counterattack?
Okay. I assume you either mean Culp's Hill or Pickett's Charge.
Maybe anywhere. Maybe just in general.
Yeah, I don't think that Meade's willing to risk a successful defense with an unsuccessful offensive.
Right.
If you look at Pickett's Charge area, there's a stone wall the Confederates have as well. And they're behind. They can get behind it. Furthermore, the defeat of the infantry had very little, if any, impact on the artillery. Remember, the Confederate guns are massed there. And yes, they're out of distance ammunition, some of them, but they still have a lot of canister to play with. So Meade, when it was recommended to him by some of his subordinates to let's go get them, he said, we're not playing the game of stone walls anymore. We're not going to do it. He did attempt to try and flank them, okay, with using Kilpatrick's cavalry in the 6th Corps. And I think if you want to get right down to it, probably due to the confusion of the moment and the lateness of the hour, it was impractical to do that. Culp's Hill had already been ruled out for offensive operations. And that was on the 2nd when he was thinking about assuming the offensive there. Slocum, Warren, those two in particular, went over the ground, looked at it, came back to him and said that it's not conducive to offensive operations.
Right.
And so he already had that filed in the back of his head that, no, we're not going to attack across there because we can't do it. Will not be successful. So that's why he was committed more to a defensive stance there after the fighting on July 3rd.
What about, you mentioned Slocum and Warren. What about Sedgwick and Hunt? What did they do? I mean, what's Sedgwick doing? Because he's kind of broken up, right? He's sent all over the place.
He's responding to Meade's requests for help.
Okay.
I guess.
So he's kind of in like a reserve position and then sending troops off.
It's like the little Dutch boy putting his finger in the dam so it doesn't break. You know?
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of what Sedgwick's doing. He's doing Meade's bidding. Okay. Is what he's doing. And you're right, his corps is scattered. The hardest thing to get a handle on is the 6th Corps.
Yeah.
It's from Culp's Hill all the way to the behind Big Round Top.
It's kind of like the core version of Burling's brigade.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
And how about Hunt at this point during the Culp's Hill stuff? What's he doing?
He basically probably oversaw the artillery fire.
Yeah.
But he's more concerned eventually with the placement of the guns, Cemetery Hill and along Cemetery Ridge
in the center
area. So I don't see him having any direct impact on the artillery barrage before Pickett's charge. Claremont Best was there. Who is he? Well, he's a graduate of West Point, 1860, Claremont Best, and he was in charge of the Corps artillery at the Battle of Chancellorsville. So, and when Slocum requested his presence, he was sent, I believe, to Washington, D.C. to help in, organization of artillery equipment and batteries, that sort of thing, taking broken batteries and refurbishing that, because he's a good organizer.
Okay.
And Slocum requested his presence, and he was one of the ones who helped place the guns on Powers Hill, the Baltimore Pike, in that area, though Muhlenberg was the one that commanded them. So Best didn't make any, didn't have any impact in the, shall we say, tactical use of the batteries, but he certainly had some impact on their placement.
Okay.
I believe, yeah.
Grant O'Brien, all the way from Australia, wants to know who was in overall command on Culp's on July 3rd?
Overall command would be Slocum. There they had worked out that little problem about the wing commander at the Corps Commanders Conference. And so when they came from that, it's Slocum who's in command of the fighting on Culp's Hill. He's pretty much in charge of the Union right. At that point, up to Cemetery Hill. So even when Shaler's men come across to support,
they're under him.
They're under him.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Going back to July 2nd, though, when Greene is left there,
yes,
is he basically autonomous, or is he still answering? Who's he answering to?
Yeah, well, he's not autonomous, but he's given permission to stay. That permission came from Meade through Slocum. Okay, because Geary's
so he's answering directly to Slocum then.
Well, yeah, at that point.
Yeah.
When he's fighting there, he's on his own hook. Slocum's not overseeing that at all. He's still acting as a wing commander. So he's back at the Baltimore Pike.
So when he's acting as a wing commander, who's in his wing and what is he doing to command the wing?
Okay, the wing was used as a way to facilitate movement.
Right.
McClellan had used it to some degree with success earlier in the war. And then what you do is you take a couple corps, and the senior corps commander commands them both, so that me can send, instead of 8 orders, he can send, let's say, 3.
Is that what they called grand divisions back then?
Yeah, grand division. I think that was under Burnside. They used that term, grand divisions there. And so Basically, it was more to facilitate movement than anything else. Once the battle starts, now you asked the question, it would be the 12th Corps and the 5th Corps would be his wing. Nominally, when the 12th Corps or the 6th Corps would come up, they would probably fall under him as well. Hancock was held in the center, and then Meade commanded the left, the other 3 corps, the 1st, the 3rd, and the 11th.
So it's the 5th Corps, but then by the end of the day on the 2nd, the 5th Corps is all on the left.
Yeah, they're all scattered over there.
So how's Slocum going to effectively command
that's what
the
Meade
right
told
and the
him.
left?
But he said, when he had Williams come to the Corps commanders meeting, and Meade wanted to know what Williams was doing there too, and he said, well, he's commanding the Corps, and I thought you were. Well, I'm the wing commander. Well, one corps over here, the other's over there.
Right.
He said, I thought you would assume that the wing no longer mattered, and Slocum is somewhat of an officious guy, and he's operating. He and Meade are friends. They're kind of like-minded, and Slocum doesn't want to tramp on Meade's toes or do something that Meade doesn't approve of. And so he said, well, if you didn't want me to command the wing, you should have told me. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. Yeah. So it was just a little glitch there that caused some
miscommunication.
Caused some friction at command, basically.
All right, and let's see what would have been the result if the Northern forces were able to get their attack started right after their artillery barrage, rather than Johnson beating them to the punch.
Good question. I don't know if they're going to be very successful. Charging down the hill, you're going to be broken up by the terrain. A lot of rocks and trees in the way. Confederates behind them. So you're basically putting the shoe on the other foot. The Confederates then would have a slight advantage of position, even though it's lower. They would have cover.
Okay.
To do that. The question is, did Geary have enough men at that point to make an impact? And I would suggest that he probably did not. Because you still, when the battle starts on the 3rd, the Confederates have a slight numerical advantage over the Union at that point. Eventually, that's corrected when Shaler comes across. Yeah, but
also not as impressive as it might have been because of the Union position.
Yes.
Yeah.
There and it. It would have been interesting to see that. Geary claimed that his men made the attack and the casualty rates don't bear it out.
There's something about fighting up a hill, and fighting up a wooded hill.
Okay,
that just seems to be more of a nightmare to me than a wide open field. Although that has its nightmarish things too, especially because artillery can be more useful there. But I can't imagine what that hill and those woods looked like and sounded like. Especially on the 2nd as it got darker.
Yes.
Just had to be just flashes of light with this like smoke hovering in the leaves and everything.
They didn't know where the Confederates were until they fired.
Yeah.
Then they could see the flash of gunfire and
then fire towards that. Jesus.
Yeah.
Mike, anything you'd like to add there in the end?
No, nothing here, man.
Oh, I like that. You went right to you in the camera.
See, I learned.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Let's see. Bill Chelsea said something Chesley, excuse me, Bill. He says, I could listen to Charlie tell stories in perpetuity, and if he doesn't make you laugh, we can't be friends. That's very nice.
Thank you.
Right? That's a nice thing to say. Thank you for that, Bill. And thank you all for watching, listening. Charlie, thank you for joining us one more time. Asking. 2 days in a row. Like I said when you came in, my cup runneth over. I am very lucky. Yes.
I did come up with a question in my head just now.
Go ahead.
So Charlie,
always when I have a good ending, somebody has to interrupt it with something. Go ahead.
So since we were talking about Slocum and then Williams taking up command, now Lockwood is a unique case, and he ended up being detached just so that there's not a problem with the order of battle, right?
Yes.
His seniority is a problem.
His seniority is a problem. He ranks Ruger.
So my subsequent question is, if Meade, and I just thought of this morning, if Meade has very unique command powers given by the president, where he can, he brought up Custer and guys like that, even though they weren't supposed to be in those roles, he can basically do whatever he wants. Why does Slocum have to go through back doors to detach Lockwood instead of Meade just saying, Williams and Ruger are where I want them to be?
Yeah, it wouldn't be Meade's call. Perhaps it would be Williams. And Meade only uses that power when necessary. Like when he sends Hancock up to take command of the Union position on July 1st. Okay, so he might not have even been aware of the situation. And in fact, if memory serves, once again, his original report credited Lockwood to the First Corps in his report. And Williams took issue with that. Now, the problem you have in the Meade's defense is that the 11th and 12th Corps were sent to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Right after, soon after the Battle of Gettysburg, and their reports do not arrive on Meade's desk, so to speak, until November, roughly November of 63, I think. And he had already turned his report in. For example, he didn't give Greene any credit whatsoever in his initial report. You might as well have erased the 12th Corps from the battle.
Do you think that's part of the reason why Culp's Hill has become more forgotten over time?
I don't think so. But it certainly is let's say it's sort of a preview of things to come.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Culp's Hill definitely was one of the places that was most visited. The veterans themselves that fought there gave a lot of credit to the men that, Greene's men and others that fought to save the hill. But then over the years, it just sort of faded into obscurity. For example, today, if you look at a park map, the driving tour, there's no stop for Culp's Hill.
No.
There's no stop.
Interesting.
There's a stop for Spangler Spring, most important.
Right.
Yeah, there's spring water.
Yeah.
You got to get that water, you know.
Don't touch it.
Yeah, don't touch it.
Yeah.
We'll share it. And it's not there anymore in spring.
Right.
Yeah, they used to have a water fountain there.
Yes, I've heard.
Yeah.
I don't remember that now.
The water fountain was awesome. I said, drink the water the soldiers drink.
I wouldn't drink any water around here out of the ground.
Well, it was Gettysburg city water as well.
Yeah. Was that really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah. So.
So you mentioned that Lockwood was credited to the First Corps. Is that because the First Corps was also on part of Culp's Hill and Stevens Knoll?
Perhaps.
Is that why?
Or just didn't realize, because he came up later. Some of his men came up later. Ruger was the ranking officer in Williams' division after Williams. Okay, Lockwood ranks Ruger, as Mike knows.
Right.
And so when he comes up, if Williams is going to turn his division over, he's going to turn it over to Lockwood. He doesn't know Lockwood. So he kept Lockwood as an independent command so that he would answer directly to him and Ruger could command the division. Now this arrangement, Mike, I don't think Meade was aware of. And if he was, he didn't feel the need to intervene because he thought it was being handled by the men there, the 12th Corps.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for us, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thank you, Charlie.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you all for watching. Thank you for your help in the back there, Mikey. And thanks to our patrons for their support and also for submitting these questions.
Good
thanks to our
questions.
callers.
Real good questions.
Yes, very good questions today. That's it for us, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you next time. And we are done.
Bingo.
We are done.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, forsooth 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and hay.